So, if you're the investor, what are your considerations? Well, they weigh heavily, in fact, in favor of wanting an assignment. And so, this is why a lot of investors think that any investment they make on behalf of an inventor or IP owner must have an assignment. That's not always the case. I'll cover that in a second, but this is why it's believed to be that way. First, it secures the investment. It's the asset that represents the other side of the transaction, money for a thing, right? The second reason is it's viewed kind of as life insurance. You know, in a way, what happens if that inventor gets hit by a car? That happens. I know I've been hit by a car. What happens if something happens to that inventor and all of a sudden you don't have a way to represent that you have control of that patent and that intellectual property in the patent office? It's in the name of the inventor. Only the inventor or his heirs or other representatives can then sign documents on behalf of that inventor. That's a tough situation for you to be in if you're an investor. It also prevents dishonest inventors, and yes, they exist, from assigning their intellectual property or disposing of it otherwise to somebody else. Another reason is because it's easier to bring other people into your deal when they can see that there's this entity and it owns this patent or trademark or other trade secrets. So it can help justify promoting that intellectual property and that through that entity. Another reason is because it motivates the inventor. You've burned the boats. In case you don't know what that refers to, the story is that when Cortez came into the New World and his Spaniards took to the shore of Mexico, they burned their boats so that they had nowhere to go. They had to go into the interior of the country. There wasn't anybody leaving. So what are the reasons that you as an inventor might not want to have an assignment on file? Well, there is an expense associated with the assignment. In addition, there's an expense associated with recording the assignment. And, you know, if you're just throwing 5, 10, 15, 20,000 bucks at a little startup, do you really want to spend 2,000 or 3,000 bucks on those expenses? And in addition, you know, we covered the other expenses related to having an entity earlier, but typically the other expenses aren't that important to you as an investor because there's going to be an entity created anyway, right? So now you're really just worried about the expenses associated with assigning the intellectual property to the entity. Now, the thing that this doesn't cover, because the question on the table is, do I assign my patent, is the alternative to assigning, and that's creating a license from the inventor or the owner of the other intellectual property into an entity. So again, this other alternative is the creation of an entity that receives licensed rights held by the inventor or inventors or other intellectual property holders. So that's something that you want to discuss with your patent attorney or other intellectual property attorney. And here's the kind of the big arching conclusion. This is why looking up and using an assignment that you find online randomly or that you get from one of these legal quickie companies is going to be one of the worst decisions you can possibly make when it comes to protecting your intellectual property, because you don't really understand and have control of the nuances of all of these factors. And so you'll want to talk to your attorney and go over the concerns that you have, and then you as an investor or you as an inventor or intellectual property holder can then together come up with a solution that works for you. You know, and I'll give you just one example. Sometimes a patent may have 5 or 6 different on the ground implementations in different industries and in different methods of use. And sometimes an investor is only really interested in deploying one of those implementations. So why would the investor want to limit the inventor from being able to move forward on the other 4 implementations? Most investors don't really care about the other 4, so that's where a license and a well-crafted assignment of rights or license of rights would make a whole lot more sense. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you got questions, leave them below or call my office for specific legal questions about your matter. And don't forget to subscribe.